from where we left off last time, which was 2:23. So let's all seek refuge in God from Satan the rejected. Auzubillahi minash shaitanir rajim. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. So we start from 2:24. Do not take God's name in vain. Do not subject God's name to your casual swearing, that you may appear righteous, pious, or to attain credibility among the people. God is uh, God is here, nor God does not hold you responsible for the mere utterance of oaths. He holds you responsible for your innermost intentions. God is forgiver clement. So one thing we learn in these verses is that we're not supposed to use God's name in vain. And a lot of times people don't understand what that really means. Like why you don't take God's name in vain. What does that mean? Uh, but we see why. The time when people say, like, sometimes, people say, "Oh God," and people say, "Oh, no, 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 don't take God's name in vain," you know, and they think that. But really, I mean, what does the Quran say about taking God's name in vain? It says, when you take God's name for your casual swearing, that you may appear pious, righteous, or attain credibility among the people. So people use that, for their casual swearing, so that they may appear pious and righteous, and people look at them as credible and trustworthy people. And and then God says that He does not hold you responsible for the mere utterances of oaths. He holds you responsible for your innermost intentions. Your innermost intentions. God is forgiver clement. So God is forgiver clement, but where does He hold them responsible is for their innermost intentions. So when these people have the intentions of I think someone's on. Can you mute your microphone, please? What happened? Okay. So yeah. When you have intentions to use God's name so that you can appear pious, righteous, and credible, I mean, it's so easy to fall into these traps. Like, without knowing sometimes so we have to really always check our intentions. I mean, we should know that if you're using God's name, are we using God's name because we're supposed to use God's name, like saying God willing and stuff, or we're using it to let the person know that I'm someone that they could trust, that I love God and I'm a religious person, or that this person should know that I'm so pious and righteous, and this person should give me respect. And people do that a lot. And so that's why it's important also here that God says He does not hold us responsible for the mere utterances of oaths, but He holds us responsible for the intentions behind it. So a lot of times people will misunderstand this also, because the example that the messenger of the covenant gave, that I have brought up in the past as well a few times, about someone saying, "Oh geez," right? And then uh, Satan making a claim against that person, that this person was commemorating Jesus, and then his claim is granted even though this person was not commemorating Jesus at all. Like, he had no intention to commemorate Jesus. But what was the difference in that case? I mean, what's the difference when someone does that? For example, when someone puts a gun to your head, and proclaim that you're not a submitter, and you don't believe in submission and all that stuff, right? Um, and you provide lip service, and it doesn't. I mean, so where does the intention come in, and where does it count and where it doesn't count? Because these are two opposite cases, right? One side, you have no intention of commemorating Jesus and you're held responsible, and on the other side, you are using God's name, but it's your intention that matters, like why you're using God's name, and God's going to hold you responsible for that. So what it means is that, your intentions matter when what you're doing is right. Yeah, I'm gonna repeat it one more time. The intentions matter when what you're doing is right, which means, like, if you're using God's name, it's a good thing, right? You're using God's name, but the thing is, now your intentions matter. Are you using God's name to show off, or you're genuinely using God's name to commemorate Him, right? As God's commandment is. And so that's where your intentions matter, right? Where intentions don't matter is, let's say you say, oh, geez, or oh, Jesus, and things like that. And then Satan makes a claim. Now, saying oh, geez, or oh, Jesus is something you're not supposed to do in the first place. You know, it's a bad action. So whether your intention, when you take a bad action, whether your intentions are good or bad or harmless, it doesn't matter because the action is bad, right? Like you cannot kill a bunch of innocent people who have not done anything to deserve it, and then think that it's good for humanity. And because your intention was that it's good for humanity, let's say, for population control or whatever, conserve resources and whatnot, that it's suddenly considered a good deed. No, what you're doing is inherently bad. So regardless of whether your intentions were good or bad, this is wrong. You're not supposed to do that. But in this case, you're using God's name, uh, commemorating God. Every chance we get is a commandment from God. But obviously, when you're using it just so you can deceive people and appear righteous and pious and show off that you're a God-fearing person, you know, then at that point your intentions do matter, and you'll be held responsible. And if your intention is to please God at that time, obviously that's going to be different. That's going to be counted for you. But if you're using it for these other motives that I just previously mentioned, then you're breaking God's law, and you're basically trying to show off in front of the people, and using God, as a way to validate your credibility, for example. But unfortunately, I mean, that's very common in today's society, and people use God for a lot of reasons, and use it to make money, and use it to deceive people. Like I, I mean, I would rather not go into details, but like when you, yeah, I mean, I've seen some horrible examples of people using God's name in vain, and it's just so hypocritical. But people just use it. I mean, literally, people put God's name in their stores and their shops, like, like in these so-called Muslim countries, so that when you enter, you look at it like, oh, let me buy from this guy. He's very righteous and honest because he has God's name all over his shop, and he's not gonna, cheat me. And those are the worst people I mean, a lot of times, right? Uh, so, obviously, these things matter. So God will now continue reading laws of divorce, Surah 2, verse 226. Those who intend um, to divorce their wives shall wait 4 months, cooling off. If they change their minds and reconcile, then God is forgiver, merciful. If they go through with the divorce, then God is hearer knower. The divorced women shall wait 3 menstruations before marrying another man. It is not lawful for them to conceal what God creates in their wombs, if they believe in God in the last day. In case of pregnancy, the husband's wishes shall supersede the wife's wishes, if he wants to remarry her. The women have rights as well as obligations equitably. Thus, the man's wishes prevail in case of pregnancy. God is Almighty, most wise. Divorce may be retracted twice. The divorced woman shall be allowed to live in the same home amicably or leave it amicably. It is not lawful for the husband to take back anything he had given her. However, the couple may fear that they may transgress God's law. If there is fear that they may transgress God's law, they commit no error if the wife willingly gives back whatever she chooses. These are God's laws. Um, do not transgress them. Those who transgress God's laws are the unjust. If he divorces her for the third time, it is unlawful for him to remarry her unless she marries another man, then divorces her. The first husband can then remarry her so long as they observe God's laws. These are God's laws. He explains them for people who know. So, Quran is the statute book and it's a book of law, and God has put out all the laws that we need to follow, as a way of life. And we can see that God has put everything in the Quran for our benefit. And one of the most, challenging things to go through is in a person's life is divorce and the complications that may come as a result of divorce. And God has put the solutions for everything in the Quran. So God has set these laws in place for the protection of women, especially, and of course, making the whole thing as least traumatic as possible. Um, so first of all, we learn from the Quran that God says that those who intend to divorce their wives shall wait 4 months, cooling off, and if they change their minds and reconcile, then God is forgiver, most merciful. I mean, and but you can see that this is in today's so-called Muslim world, among the Mohammedans. I mean, that concept is non-existent because, I mean, we've all heard the stories like, I mean, they sound ridiculous, but it's actually a reality, like let's say the husband gets mad at his wife and then he sends her a text, saying divorce, divorce, divorce 3 times, and mostly common in South Asian countries and stuff, right? But really, I mean, they count that as a divorce, and you have to say it 3 times. And if you say it 3 times, then you can't remarry her. And then they have these people that you can pay to have to sleep with your wife if you want to remarry her, and only then it's possible. And it's, I mean, of course, it's nasty. The whole thing is just gross. It's an abuse of God's law, and that shows how people, when they don't follow God, how they're blinded and shielded from understanding the Quran. But what God says to us here, I mean, it's very wise in terms of preventing these types of stupid situations. And so we can see that if you intend to divorce, I mean, divorce is not something that you just wake up in the morning and because your wife didn't cook the right meal for you or something, or whatever the situation might be that upset you, and then you just say divorce, divorce, or whatever, and then it's over. God says you have to, like, divorce is not an easy decision, so you have to cool off. Like, if there's something that has happened amongst the couple, I mean, they need to really think over this thing. I mean, divorce is not a thing that you do it and it stays for, like, I don't know, a couple of days and then it's over with. No, I mean, it's something that will affect your life permanently, and if there are children involved, it will affect theirs as well. So it's something that you have to really think over, like, is this really the last resort? Like, is this something really that I need to do? And you think about it more and more, and you have 4 months, in this time. And in those 4 months, like, things can change, the situations, the couple might be going through some difficult times or stressful times, and they could be fighting with each other, or they might have developed a misunderstanding. But these 4 months allow them to reconcile and resolve those differences. And after that, God says, if they change their minds and reconcile, then God is forgiver, most merciful. So obviously, it's also a way to discourage divorce, because if there's no cooling off, more people will get upset and get divorced and then regret it later. But this is obviously also for the protection of women, because the husband might be upset and could put the wife on the streets, and then she'll have nowhere to go. But this allows him to really think over his decision with a cool mind, and maybe he may be able to forgive and forget and resolve amicably during this period. But God says if they go through with the divorce, then God is hearer nor. So it's interesting that it says that here, that then God is here and nor. I mean, it's like divorce is discouraged strongly in the Quran as well, and it's discouraged in the society unless there are really compelling circumstances that make it necessary to get the divorce. For example, if the one of the spouses is you know uh, uh, extremely like violent and abusive, for example, um, either verbally or physically, and there's no way possible to maintain a healthy, loving relationship. Then the couple may decide that this is more hurtful than anything, and they may decide to get the divorce. But God says He's the here and now. If if such a thing happens, then God knows exactly why the divorce was there, and if your reasoning for getting the divorce is validated. God sees your intentions and what you did and why you're getting it. So we cannot just fool God and, let's say, make a commitment and then be selfish later on because you don't want responsibility or something like that, and then you come up with excuses, and then you eventually go through with a divorce. No, because you have to try sincerely and follow all of God's laws to make sure that you do what is necessary, and then if it happens, for any reason that's unavoidable, inevitable, then God knows. God is here, and obviously He's forgiving, most merciful. I mean, divorce is obviously discouraged in the Quran, but it's not prohibited, because there will be these types of special circumstances where a divorce might be the only way. um, so then in verse 228, it says that the divorce women shall wait 3 menstruations before marrying another man. And this is important because if the wife doesn't wait 3 menstruations, let's say, she could have slept with the husband, let's say 2 days before they had a fight, and then if they ended up going through the 4 months and ended up going through the divorce, then she still has to wait another 3 menstruations, which is each menstruation being roughly about 28 days. So she has to wait like 28 times 3, which is almost 3 months after the divorce, before consummating her marriage with another person, just to make sure that the woman is not pregnant. And if the woman is pregnant, then there is the exception, and in that case, the husband's wishes shall supersede. So the husband may decide at that time that it's better for the baby, that she doesn't uh, remarry at that time, and because the woman could be going through like hormonal changes and everything, and that could really cloud her judgment as well. And the fact that there's a newborn involved in that also would also affect the well-being of the child. I mean, there's so many reasons why they're behind God's laws, and so much wisdom when you think about it. So, but the bottom line is that if something like that was ever to happen to anybody, they would have to follow these laws. And God says those who don't follow these laws are actually transgressors. And we know that so basically it says the divorce may be retracted twice, meaning if you went through with the divorce, you can remarry, or retract, in other words, because you don't, for example, will have like a ceremony or of some sort, or reset the dowry again with the same wife, who already has the dowry, for example. So you just basically, at that point, you just basically retract the divorce and you get back together. You don't need to, do anything else. You don't have to, have a dowry and stuff like that. So that can happen twice. But let's say you marry a woman, and then first time, and then something happens and you get a divorce, then you marry that same woman again, which at that point you might be doubtful, like you might question yourself, like I divorced this woman once, is it the right decision? I'm remarrying her. And then you remarry her, and then divorce happens again, and then you do it the third time. You're like, really, I divorced this woman twice before. I mean, I mean, are you really sure you want to marry her? And you marry her, right? And the third time you get divorced as well, you know? Now there is something seriously wrong with your judgment. Like, why are you marrying the same person over and over and going to divorce? You know, like that's not even like normal for somebody, you know? But yet, I mean, it's a case that God has covered. And so if you see that, then at that point, you know, you cannot remarry that person right away. You should marry someone else, see how it's like, and then you know if things don't work out, you can go back. You know, I mean, this is really, I mean, it's funny at the same time. You know, it's amazing God's laws. You know, but we have to look at God's wisdom. You know, in all of this. But it's not obviously. You know, the traditional Muslims have abused this thing, and they just say divorce, divorce, divorce 3 times. They think that retraction means that you know you say it once and then you can retract it, and you say it again, you can retract it, and then the third time you say it, it's done. You know, which is a misunderstanding that they have. You know, otherwise, you know, it doesn't make sense. And when we see the disasters and the calamities that happen because of you know this you know absurd understanding of these verses, but these are really set in place for the protection of women, especially, and also you know for the relationship of the man, the women, and the kids, and whatever else is part of the divorce. You know, the financial repercussions as well. And so also, you know, one of the laws that we see here is that the divorced women shall be allowed to live in the same home amicably or leave amicably. So once the woman is divorced, you know, she may be allowed to live in the same home as you while she's there. Obviously, you know, if you're divorced with a woman, I mean, you don't intend to live forever in the same home, you know, but it's just until, you know, the woman may make, you know, alternative arrangements for herself. But if there's nothing, I mean, there's not no harm in her living in the same home amicably or leaving amicably. And it's important, like, you know, God mentions amicably because you know divorce is not an easy event in someone's life, and it's very stressful and traumatic, you know, as it is. And so if it's not done amicable, you know, it turns very very ugly, and it can be devastating to the well-being of you know the couple. So God wants us to be very very careful, and we have to do it very amicably, you know. And it's mostly you know the children that suffer the most and are hurt the most, you know, in these. So it's very important, you know, for the well-being of the spouses also, but also for the well-being of any children that are involved. That you know you have to make sure that it's done in an amicable fashion. And then God says that it's not lawful for the husband to take back anything he has given her. So if you have given, you know, loss of money or property and you know material possessions of some sorts, I mean, you can't just now that you're no longer married, you can't be vicious and demand it back. You know, something that you already gave to someone. You know, like it's like, you know, you go to someone's birthday party and then you give them a gift and they're happy, and then you have a fight with that person. Let's just for some reason things go wrong, and then you're like, I want my gift back. You know, and obviously, you know, and then doing that with a spouse with you have given things, you know, I mean, they might not even have them there, you know, given the, you know, how, depending on how much time they've spent together, I mean, they might not even have those things anymore, you know, so demanding things like that back, God says is, you know, a transgression. But God says, you know, if the wife wants to willingly give back something, you know, then she can do that, because let's say, you know, the wife doesn't need anything, and then God says just you don't take back, you know, doesn't mean that, you know, if she gives something that's prohibited. No, but if she gives it on her own free will, just by herself, then it's fine. You know, it's up to her if she wants to give something, but you can't ask for anything back. Uh, and God says, like I said, these are God's laws, and if you transgress them, you know, those people who do that, they're unjust. And God says, of course, you know, He does not love the unjust. So we have to do this very carefully. Um, also, uh, Uh, so I already mentioned about verse 230, where if you get married to a woman 3 times and get divorced 3 times, then you can't go and remarry the person the fourth time. You'll have to marry another person before you can go back and divorce them before you can go back to your previous spouse. And also, then 231, God says, "Do not throw the divorcees uh, out onto the streets." Um, if you divorce the women, once they fulfill their interim 3 menstruations, you shall allow them to live in the same home amicably, or let them leave amicably. Do not force them to stay against their will as a revenge. Anyone who does this wrongs his own soul. Do not take God's revelations in vain. Remember God's blessings upon you, and that He sent down to you the scripture. He sent down to you the scripture and wisdom to enlighten you. You shall observe God and know that God is aware of all things. So one of the things, obviously, we see people do the first thing they do is when they get when they get the divorces. In the Eastern cultures, a woman is thrown out on the streets. A lot of times it's very common. They just kick the woman out of the house, and God, and this mostly happens in the so-called Islamic countries, right? Where they just uh, tell the woman to leave everything and get out, and women usually being, some of them could be homemakers, might not have any way of living, might not be independent, or sometimes they might, I mean, of course, a lot of women choose to stay at home and, be homemakers and stuff like that, and they might not even be able to re-enter the workforce right away, even if they wanted to, and they have responsibilities with kids and all that stuff, and then throwing them out on the street, is going to devastate them. Throwing anybody out on the street is really devastating, and traumatizing, but doing that while you're having a divorce, obviously, and with a woman, obviously, that's really bad. But unfortunately, we see that happen all the time. So God says, that should not happen. And, if the woman wants to stay, she can stay amicably. If she wants to leave, she can leave amicably. And then God says, do not force her to stay against her will as a revenge as well. And anyone, God says, who does this wrongs his soul. And we should take God's revelation seriously. We shouldn't take them in vain, and we should remember God's blessings upon us, that He has sent the scripture and wisdom, to enlighten us. And so we have to be appreciative that God has given these laws to us as a blessing. These are not laws to burden us. Some people might think that this makes their life more difficult. It would have been easy, if there were no laws in place and you just get rid of the woman, just close the door, throw out all her stuff and whatnot, and just start a new life, or just enjoy your freedom or whatnot. But God has set these things in motion because it's for the benefit of both, the husband and the wife. Because this also shows that I mean, divorce. You can't just marry someone and change your life and then expect to just cancel it, at the drop of a hat, like some kind of a contract that you have for a job or something, where you're fired at will, and then the person's just left with nothing, and they have to start all over and find another spouse or something like that. It's a very serious commitment, and if you want to get out of that commitment, it's not something that you can just completely wash your hands off of and just be free. I mean, it has lifelong implications and responsibilities that you have to fulfill. So it's something that must be taken very seriously, and that's why, I mean, marriage in itself is something that you don't physiologically and psychologically mature to make such decisions. As we see, people force themselves into a relationship, kids into marriages that are not fully mature yet. They might be physiologically mature, but mentally, they might not be mature. And so maybe like they might be 16, 17, or 18, and in those ages, it's very common for girls who get engaged and or married. Most of the time, they're not responsibility, and so it has to complete. And then God says that force once they fulfill their intern, do not prevent them from remarrying. I mean, that's important too. Because the best thing for them at that point might be, to reconcile, let's say, especially if they have children together, and it's something that uh, has been reconciled. Like, obviously, if you have marriage is something that's done when you have differences that cannot be reconciled. Like I mentioned, let's say, like, they don't want one person does not want to reconcile, for example, does not want to change their ways, and constantly is trying to take advantage of the other spouse, and just abusing the relationship, abusing the spouse as well. For example, beating them up or something, and cheating on them and things like that. Sleeping with other women, for example, and not taking care of any of their responsibilities. So these are things that you could reconcile with the spouse. Even no matter how serious they are, right? But if the spouse is willing to stop their behavior or actions, whatever they might be, that is causing these problems. I mean, if they are able to fix it even after they reconcile, then I mean, even after they get the divorce, then you don't stop them, because reconciliation, God says, is the best thing. Um, I mean, even though it's a rare occurrence, we know, but it still happens, and people do end up remarrying their ex spouses. So, God says you shouldn't stop them. And this is a commandment from God. It says, this shall be heeded by those among you who believe in God in the last day. This is purer for you and more righteous. God knows why you do not know. So, while we may have our own, desires, and we may have our own opinions about the spouse, or, your, stuff. Let's say, you have a brother and he married someone, and you're trying to stop him because you think it's good for him that he moves on and finds someone else. God says he knows better. So they may have children and things like that, where it could be the best thing would be that if they can fix those problems, that they could just get together and stay together, for because again, divorce is discouraged, and it's a traumatizing experience for them to go through. um so, one last verse I would read, and then we'll stop here, is 2:33. Divorced mothers shall nurse their infants 2 full years, uh, if the father so wishes. The father shall provide the mother's food and clothing equitably. No one shall be burdened beyond his ability. No mother shall be harmed on account of her infant, nor shall the father be harmed because of his infant. If the father dies, his inheritor shall assume these responsibilities. If the infant's parents mutually agree to part after due consultation, they commit no error by doing so. You commit no error by hiring nursing mothers, so long as you pay them equitably. You shall observe God and know that God is seer of everything you do. So, okay, so looking at this verse, we see that uh, the time of nursing for the kid is for the baby is 2 years, right? And God says they shall nurse uh, for 2 years if the father wishes. And the father has to provide the mother's food and clothing equitably, meaning, he can't be stingy and stuff. He has to be reasonable and equitable based on his income. He should provide for the wife, equitably. And the mother shall not be, and no one shall be burdened beyond his ability. So then also, it shouldn't be so that, you want to be equitable with the wife, but you take it to the extreme to the point that it burdens the other spouse. It burdens the husband because now he has to, work like a slave, or borrow money from people so he can pay for this. I mean, he cannot be burdened beyond his abilities. If depending on his income, I mean, he's supposed to help the family. And I mean, this is how we see the laws are in, the modern worlds where, they look at your income and then they make these decisions. And then God says, no mother shall be harmed on the account of her infant, nor shall the father be harmed on account of his infant. So we have to understand that the infant cannot be harmed on account of the father. Let's say the father was very abusive to the mother, right? And the mother has a child with him, and the mother, cannot take it out on the child, what the man has done to her, and neglect her duties. So she can nurse. She should nurse if the husband asks for it. And the husband should provide the mother's food and clothing equitably. Based on his abilities at the same time. And they should not be harmed on account of that. And the father shall not be harmed on account of the infant. So let's say, if the woman's taking care of the infant, I mean, she can't continue to, put extra burden on him and use that as an excuse to, abuse the situation and just try to get whatever she wants out of it just because, she has the child and he doesn't, and the women could use that against their husbands as well in certain countries, like, they may, prevent them from, for example, they may prevent the women from meeting their children. They could separate them and stuff like that. And or the father, they may get, like, just for example, restraining orders and whatnot because of the thing, and complicate the situation just because of the father, for the child. And then the child, so the child doesn't have to suffer. Let's say if the uh, father was, did not have a good relationship with the woman, for example, the woman cannot, let's say, make the child, grow up completely without the father and try to, push him away out of their lives, for example, and punish the child in that way, because obviously he's not gonna have he or she is not gonna have a balanced childhood without a parent, one of the parents present in their lives. So God says that also if the father dies, whoever the inheritor is after the father dies, so it could be one of the family members, so whoever it is, they shall assume those responsibilities if the father dies, because the child, has to be taken care of, and the woman has to be provided for during that time. It's a very crucial time for the baby, especially during the nursing period. So God is ensuring that she is protected the whole way through, and these laws are again set there for the protection of the women, so they are cared for and provided for, and they have a smooth journey during this process. And God says if the infant's parents mutually agree to part. So let's say, the wife, is pregnant, and her interim ended upon giving birth, and now the baby is there, I mean, if he's an infant, but let's say both of them decide we want to get a divorce and we want to separate at this time, God says that if and there's a good reason for it. I mean, God says they don't commit any error by doing so at that time. Doesn't mean that it's the that it's saying like, yeah, if you divorce there's no error, but no, it's just saying that uh, basically you don't commit any error that if you separate at that time, if you both decide that it's never going to work out and you just end up parting ways at that time, while the baby's an infant, I mean, this can't be held against them just because the baby is an infant. They commit no error, at that time. Um, and then even if, let's say, the mother doesn't want to nurse the child for whatever reason or can't nurse the child, uh, God says, uh, well, it says the woman shall nurse the infant for 2 years. But then it says, if this says you commit no error by hiring nursing mothers so long as you pay them equitably. So if, let's say, the mother doesn't want to, nurse the child, meaning, feed them, breast milk instead of, something else, then, they can hire nursing mothers, and that's also important here. It's like, because the mother's milk is very important for the child. It's there to provide like nutrition, and it's God's way of, nurturing the child, protecting them from lots of diseases. And there's so many medical benefits of, making the child grow on, real mother's milk or any woman's milk rather than, powdered solutions that they make in factories, that will not have the ingredients that God has designed by nature. So you can hire nursing mothers, which are even available in today's society, believe it or not, in the modern world, and you can still hire nursing mothers for those children. I mean, they shouldn't be just because the wife doesn't want to breastfeed. I mean, they shouldn't be like uh, looking at this, it's better that you don't put them on, other things and just completely eliminate, breast milk, from their nurturing and their nutrition as the infants. God says, "You shall observe God and know that God is seer of everything you do." Of course, God sees all circumstances, so He knows all circumstances. So let's say if you cannot find a nursing mother, then God knows, it's not like, you'll be held responsible. If the nursing mothers are not there, I mean, obviously, where are you going to find one if they're not available? Uh, uh, God, knows everything, and He. That's why it says, He's a seer of everything. So we can see, how detailed this book is and how God leaves nothing out of this book because we believe that the Quran is complete, perfect, and fully detailed, and that's why we believe that, and we believe that all the laws from like birth to death, everything is in this book, and this is our statute book, and we need to make sure that we follow these laws, if we because if we don't, we basically pay with our own happiness. And so basically, we do have the freedom not to follow, but as long as you're willing to pay the price with your happiness, and so obviously the right, if if you truly believe in the Quran, you know that all of these laws are there for your own benefit, so you must follow them, and so that you can your quality of life should be good and your child's quality of life should be good in these cases that we just read for during going to divorce. I mean, imagine like the child ends up suffering because of a traumatic divorce while the baby is an infant and the couple doesn't follow these laws, and then the child finds out all the things that happen. I mean, he might definitely, if he's normal and everything, I mean, he might still like lose respect, or let's say something happens to the child as a result, and as he grows older and knowing the details, I mean, he could resent the parents for that as well, but all these laws are in place. Bottom line is that these are in place for our own good in this complete and fully detailed scripture, and it is for our own benefit. that we follow these laws. And with that, I'd like to end. And God willing, if anybody has any comments or questions, feel free. Thank you.
Mashallah, praise God for the awesome study.
MashaAllah. Thank you, Solomon. Praise God.
Inshallah, thank you. Thank you, guys.
I just wanted to comment on the laws of divorce, like how God has cleared everything regarding the divorce uh, in detail in this chapter, mashallah. Um, and literally the mockery of God's laws, calling 3 times quick divorce, and then later on repenting. I have heard stories where people have actually done that and then they had to, like, and it is still happening, that they have to hire somebody just to marry this woman for one night, and they're doing this kind of work. In even UK there were some news, like there is a guy who's an expert in this, and then he would just marry her for one night and then divorce it. And like, how ridiculous is that? Why would God make such a law? Obviously there is a reason. Not marry even, like, after divorcing a woman 3 times, meaning you divorce, they reconcile, you divorce, they reconcile, doing all that interim period and everything. It, first of all, to do one divorce, it takes a long time, and and then you regret or you feel differently about each other, you get back. So however, third time divorcing, meaning God is allowing a person to remarry now and then decide. Remarry, not just, oh, I have to get back to this person. You won't be back with this person again until the woman actually marries and sees the difference, like, okay, really. So not keeping in that mind, I don't think that would be even a good thing to do. Just for the sake of that, I must marry somebody. Like, who are you kidding here, right? So, meaning, like, if a woman marries to somebody else and then decides to divorce that person and then wants to come back, which is like highly unlikely, under like really unusual circumstances, that could happen. Maybe there are children involved or something else. Otherwise, they cannot be repeating the same mistake over and over again. And so, really, like when you look at the Islam today, nothing is left sacred. Nothing is being practiced, which is according to the Quran, correctly. It's everything is messed up.
Yeah, mashallah. Even you look at the other religions like Christianity, it's more closer to Islam, is that they don't just say 3 times and it's done. I mean, when they get divorced, they have to go through the whole process of going to the court and showing before the judge, and judge is going to ask critical questions, and he's going to try every possible to reconcile these couple. And it's a long process. It's more closer to the tradition, the regular Islam, that what God says, than what these people do. I mean, obviously people get angry for things, and a husband gets angry and says it 3 times, and they think it's been divorced, but in reality it's not. They still are married, and that's not the proper way to go. We learned that this is the box that you don't want to open it yet. I mean, the box of divorce, that should be your last resort, tucked in deep into sort of storage area, where as a last resort you want to open that box when you know that your relationship is not working, and you both have to mutually come to that point that this, it's just not working. I mean, you come home every day, you angry at me for things, and I have my own things going, and we've been struggling for a while, and then let's open that box. But before you open that box, we learn from other places in the Quran that a person from the wife's family and the husband's family has to be invited, and they have to be present, and it has to be sort of a court system that both of them their action should be trying to work it out. The person from the wife's family and the husband's family, and if they do decide, let's go through let's we gonna I think we're gonna go through divorce, but so that's the agreement they make, and just we learn from these verses, then they have to wait 4 months, the cooling off period. I mean, how merciful God is, that He even is trying to every possibility to teach us that don't go that way. That has to be the last resort. I mean, God is not only looking for the husband, also looking for the wife, and also looking for the children. And a lot of time in the community that we live in, we see a lot of single parents. In our local school, they even encourage fathers to come in and act as a father for the children. They don't have fathers because they grew up without fathers. Some grew up without mothers, and they have that empty spot. And you can literally see these kids have like emptiness on their faces. Sometimes you go to your kid's school and you see a lot of children there. Only one parent shows up, and you can see their faces. I mean, this is the reality. And God is trying every possible way to protect these children, because when you get married, you were the one who decided. You were the one who said, I love you. What happened? I mean, just because something, I mean, God has provided you 99 things. Just because one thing was missing in your wife or your husband, you're gonna make that as a big issue, and then try to go the other way just because that one thing was not there. Yeah, it has to be a valid reason. And mashallah, how God talks about that. God is, whenever God says something, God says that if you do decide to go your way, God is here. He knows. So I mean, your case is not only in this world's court, your case is also presented in God's court. And He says, and it's amazing, when every verse ends, pretty much God is saying according to the situation. God says He's knower, He knows everything. Like verse 26 ends with, like, if you go through in the cooling off period and you reconcile, because you did, in that sense, you made a mistake, and now you come back, that it was your mistake. God says He's a forgiver. And the next verse, God says, if you go through it, then He's here and knower. Mashallah. That's my point.
And another important thing I wanted to talk about, like divorce, women and people, like if somebody divorce, like in certain countries, and they, okay, now you don't talk to this person, you just disappear from their life, you never look them. God says, do not throw the divorcees out on into the street. They can live in the same house. Like these people have shared part of their lives together intimately, and it doesn't mean that they can, not accommodate each other financially and stay friends, or have like a civil relationship due to kids or something, right? It really becomes miserable. The society just makes it like such a horrible thing and cliche or whatever, the taboo. And it's like people think they're not even supposed to look at this person. Okay, this is a namaram now or something, and it's like suddenly, like you never shared anything, and that is really wrong. I think
Hmm.
people, it's so important for divorced parents, especially if children are involved, to have a really good relationship so their kids don't see them, bickering and fighting and absolutely hating each other and not looking at each other. Well, now you have separated your ways. At least you're human beings. You can be friends, you can be very nice to each other. Have, you can even have gatherings together with your children. However, you want to create a relationship. Doesn't have to be husband and wife. And that is so important for, like, it is already such a loss for children. They always want to see their parents together. And if that cannot happen, at least have amicably uh, continuation of life for their sake, so they can see them in a different way.
Yeah, I think also, Mushal, a good point. Also, like I noticed, like it doesn't say like um when it says like do not throw the divorcees out on the streets. In the subtitle, even though the verse is talking about the women, you know, the subtitle does not make a distinction here between the man and the woman. So,
Yeah,
you know,
exactly. Mashallah.
yeah. So, here, like a lot of, I mean, you can definitely throw the woman out on the streets, but the men get thrown out, quite literally on the streets.
Yeah, in these cultures, that it's
Yeah,
more highly likely
yeah,
that the man can get kicked out, or
exactly.
yeah, because conventionally
Mm,
men own the house, and in those countries, or I'm just,
mm,
yeah, no, I'm glad you brought that point out, because of course
mm,
it doesn't literally say that. That's just any gender, if it is a mutual house, a woman
mm,
throws the man out.
mm,
But a lot of those cases, some are abuse related, where a man must leave, or a woman is abusive, whoever is being aggressive for the safety sake. If a man is a drunk and or very
mm,
aggressive and abusing, it's better that they're out of that premises, those
mm,
premises. That's a different situation.
mm,
But what God is advocating here is to make divorce not a horrible thing. You can amicably decide a lot of things. You have spent a chunk of life together. Don't become enemies to each other right now
mm.
after.
How do you define the in a Western culture where if you divorce, like according to the Quran, when divorce happens, you have to provide them and you have to do all this. You already given dowry and in the beginning, but in Western cultures, everything gets divided 50-50. So, but if you live in a country, how do you go about that?
So basically, I can answer that. So basically, even in a Western country like in the US, I mean, like for example, in California, it's the same thing, and I think most states have the same laws, similar laws. So it's like, if there are types of divorce, if you are able to come to an agreement with your spouse on, who gets what, and how you're gonna make this arrangement. Like you have amicably come to an agreement. You don't have to involve the court in splitting up the assets. Like you can say we have reached our agreement, and the courts will stay out of it, and you will just divide whatever you want amongst yourself. But when courts get involved is when, let's say, there's a disagreement between the two, and the wife demands or the husband demands more than the wife wants to give, or the other way around, vice versa. So that's when the courts will get involved and will, try to split, things 50-50 or whatnot. Like if it's something that you can do it on your own, then they will not do that.
Just
But if
to
the
add to. Mhm.
I'm s- no, so if the wife decide to take half, or which is not hers, or husband try to take half, if like wife was working and she's the one earn all that money, that mean they're going against God's commandment, right? In that sense.
Yeah, I mean when the courts do it, I mean they evaluate everything, They evaluate your income, they evaluate their income, how much they made, how much their expenses are, how much debts they have, and then they, come up with a number. But yeah, I mean, it can, well, but they always favor the woman anyways, which is some which is good in most cases, right? But in some cases, I mean, women definitely take advantage of that. You know, some women use I mean, use the divorce as a means of surviving. Like I saw this movie where there was a daughter, or there's a woman and her daughter, you know, and this is the business that they do. You know, like they go and they find rich people, really rich people, and then you know the woman uses her daughter to seduce her husband, the new husband, and then catches her cheating on him, and then files for divorce and gets all the money. You know, so I mean, yeah, people can abuse it, but I mean, in most cases, like you know, it could be. I mean, a lot of cases it could be reasonable, but they look at all the factors, you know, because let's say like who's taking the kids, you know, what are the expenses of the kids, all of that stuff they put into the equation, and then they make those. So, but let's say if you have property and stuff like that, you know, I mean, that's an easy thing, you know. But when it comes to like alimony and all that, you know, like they check everything in that sense, you know. But like if you have property, you know, you have uh, you know, assets that you had from before you were married are not treated the same way as assets you gained while the two of you were married, you know. So those all of those things are taken into consideration. But if like again, you know, if you do it the way with Quran, and you know you give them the dowry, you have given them all the dowry, and you're able to come up with an agreement and what you want to give her and what she wants to give you or take, you know, then you don't even have to involve the courts, and the whole process is a lot you know easier.
Yeah, mashallah, if one is a submitter and a believer, and this person knows, you know how why God mentioned in many verses at the end that he's knower, he knows everything, he's the most just. He's so this person should know, like in verse 228, in the middle it says, if you okay that if they believe in God and the last day. I mean, if you believe in that, if you believe in God and if you believe in the last day mean that you know that you're going to be standing before in the court of God and by yourself, you know, everything will be tested, you know, and you know that God mentions in many places that he knows our innermost thoughts. So why what we're doing is, that's the critical thing, that if you decide to divorce someone, maybe you found another person better, maybe you will fall in love with somebody else and you leave this person abandoned, just because whatever the reason is. And it's not a, I mean, as we learned, the divorce has to be a valid reason. And your innermost thoughts, God knows that. Why are you playing all this game? Maybe you start abusing the relationship, so maybe this person will become upset with me, and on their own they're gonna leave. You create a situation in your home that the person gets so frustrated, and then and just leave it, because your intentions were something different. Because you don't want to get the blame of divorce, you created a situation, this person leaves and you become a good person, and now you marry somebody else. I mean, there's so many different kind of plays can go on. But remember, we need to remember that God knows our innermost thoughts, why we're doing what we're doing. And that is linked with belief in God and the day of judgment. If we believe in day of judgment, we will be very careful with whatever we do. Marshall, I just want to point out.
Wow. All right. That's true. Anybody else? Anyone has more comments?
Assalamu alaikum. I had one
Assalamu alaikum.
question, but it was about the previous lectures, the studies,
Oh, sure.
because I missed two of them, the live ones, but I watched on YouTube.
Uh,
I had a question. It was about zakat and about being friends um, let's say God's enemies, right?
mm,
Um, the question about zakat was, I have a friend. He's doing charity business, So he's sending. He has some people, and they are sending money to poor countries. But this friend of mine, he's not a submitter, and he doesn't accept submission as belief. And is it okay for me to send my charity to him or my zakat to him so he can send this to other people? That was one question. And the other one was there is a mosque here, and this mosque is a mosque where I literally grew up, but it's a Sunni mosque. So they have something like every month you can give some charity there. It's going online, and I have a small amount sending there for this mosque. I wanted to know if that's okay to send there because it's a Sunni mosque, right? Not a Submitters mosque. Um, can I have some answers or your opinions of this one?
Uh, sure, yeah. I mean, these are great questions. So,
You'll get very negative answers.
Or
yeah,
if,
No,
I
just
no,
mean,
no
the thing
problem.
is,
I want to know
yeah,
what I need to do right. Okay, so
yeah. So, I mean, the thing
mm,
is, like, I mean, it's very easy for at least one of your questions, like, that you're asking about, you know, whether you can support these messages or not.
yes,
I mean, it's very easy to understand. I mean, why would you support a masjid that belongs to Satan? Right? Because, like you see, 107 and 108, God says there are those who abuse the masjid by practicing idol worship, dividing the believers, and providing comfort to those who oppose God and His messenger. They solemnly swear, our intentions are honorable. God bears witness that they are liars. And then the footnote says, any masjid where the practices are not devoted absolutely to God alone belongs to Satan, not God, So basically, you're supporting Satan through your
hmm.
finances, at that
So I
time.
will immediately stop doing this. But my idea was like, okay, you have the Kaaba right in Mecca, and at that time, the Muslims they went there and they practiced
Hmm.
submission there at that time when even Kaaba was in the hands of the mushriks, idol worshippers.
Hmm.
So that was the thing where I was saying, okay, it is still actually a mosque. Maybe one day it will become a mosque for submitters, right? And then
Hmm.
that was the idea. But I have
Right.
got my answer for
Yeah,
that one.
mashallah, because God says you should never pray in such a masjid. But the Kaaba is not the same because there's only one Kaaba, and it's not like
Mm,
masjids there. You can have, I mean, you're forced in this situation where there's no other way. You have to do your obligations, and the fact that these people
mm,
are there doesn't mean that you can't do it. But in masjids, obviously, God says a masjid that is established on the basis of reverencing God and gain His approval better you should. I mean, God says the masjid is better to pray in a masjid, that's based uh, on the basis of righteousness from the first day. So if you have money, instead of giving it to these masjids, you can give it to, someone who's building a masjid, or you can use that money to build a masjid if
mm,
you have extra charity. But of course, your money to build a masjid or support a masjid does not come under your zakat charity. Your zakat charity is something that God has set the laws on who it goes to and in what order, and basically you should try to give it to people personally, because like with these organizations, what happens is, they give some to the administration and this and that, and you don't know, a lot of times, a lot of the portion of that money does not even go towards a charity. It goes towards, or actually helping those people. It goes towards other expenses, other things. So so the card charity doesn't need to go towards maintenance of these organizations, for example, right? It has to specifically go to those people, and you have that obligation. Like, you have to start with your family and that circle, people that are close to you, and then if there's no need, then it goes outwards, like then it goes outwards to the needy and the traveling alien, all that. You have to follow that exact order, and if you do that, like, chances are that you're not gonna get that far out where you are, giving money to other organizations, let alone these so-called Islamic organizations. You don't even know, like some of them could even be funding terrorism, right? Jihad and all these activities. So you definitely, and I mean, and whether they are doing that or not, I mean, they're still, God says they belong to Satan if they are not dedicated, absolutely to keeping the practices, for God alone, which is just a purely submitter masjid. That's it.
I see. I see. Even
Um,
still, if you because they have a different system, so you send the money and then they need to send the money to those poor countries, and the bank takes also money for sending that money, right? And they are paying this part of it. But I got my answer for that one also. But is there some other place where we can send our because there is none in my in this area, or because I'm looking first to the family and then the people who are very close, but still I cannot find a place to give the zakat. And that was also the reason why I was searching for a place where I can send the money to poor country and guys who are
So,
doing this.
so I didn't understand. You're sending you're sending money to the organizations because you don't have people, like you don't have relatives.
Yes, no, I have relatives, but if I look at the Quran, right, the ayat,
Uh,
and there it says your father and then close relatives, etc. So if I go to that line, then I come up with the place where I need to give the money to poor people. And
yeah, but
because
that
the
comes to
yeah,
the point where if your parents are not needy, right? If your
yeah,
relatives are not needy, most likely if your parents are not needy, you definitely have relatives that are needy, so, or you definitely will find like orphans around you that are needy, for example. You just have to look. But the thing is that the part that I'm stressing on is like you can give charity to any kind of organization, right? And if you're doing it for a good cause, it's a charity, is a charity, right? But the thing is, if you're talking about the zakat, right? The zakat has to given to these specific categories, and none of those categories, it says that you can give your zakat to an organization for, like, let's say building a mosque and all that stuff, right? So you have to give it uh, for these specific categories, and you don't know how much of your zakat is actually going to go towards that actual cause, so your money, there are chances that you might be giving less than your actual zakat because you don't, let's say they might be using 90% of your zakat to give to the people, and then 10%, they might be using for their maintenance, or some of them could be using 50%, some of them could even be using 80% for their own agendas, and then the 20% goes towards the poor people, let's say. You don't have that guarantee, so because of that, the zakat itself, just as a way of safety, you just give it to that specific category. And then if you want to give other things to, like, mosques and stuff like that, which should be only submitter mosques, if you're talking about mosques based on the verses I read, then you can give it to them. But that shouldn't be like your zakat charity. It should just be like extra charity that you give on top of your zakat if you have extra left.
yeah, I
okay.
just wanted to add to this, brother. Nowhere in the Quran we connect the zakat to mosque at all. I know a lot of Muslim countries they do that. They send it to mosque for some water taps or food or something. If you cannot, there is you can still find somebody who there is a neighbor, traveling alien, or you can feed the hungry, or you can give to the poor. But the organizations do not deserve zakat because God, you need to directly, your money need to directly be beneficial to somebody who is in personally in need of money and you know them. So that's why the neighbor, somebody, they're orphans. Find a family who has orphans, in your country. Or if you don't, then ask a submitter that where your zakat could go. It could benefit needy, either submitters or uh,
Mhm.
orphans or somebody extremely in need, rather than, first of all, the idol worshipping masjid is going against God. You're not gonna get credit for that at all, even for charity, let alone zakat. First of all, zakat doesn't even go there. Charity you cannot give to such people who are spreading falsehood, and they are spreading wrong falsehood about religion, God, making lies about God, and poisoning people's minds innocently. Of course, they think they're doing the right thing. So you cannot, absolutely not even think about supporting these
Mhm.
enemies of God in any way. So you can find many charities, connect with other submitters and ask them. Uh, like we ask each other, like in our family, if somebody's in needy, we announce, and then people either send their zakat or send their extra charity, more than zakat. Like, first you take care of the zakat, and then extra charity should also go to there is a category of God, you know, where the feed the hungry, the poor, the needy, the traveling alien, and is so on. Yes, and like Solomon said, if you really wanna help a masjid, that must be a submitters masjid, which are, you know,
Mhm.
spreading the word of God and the truth.
So I also want to mention the another verse about charity, so you can notice the difference because there is a verse about charities, but that's not about zakat. Okay, when it comes to organizations, right? So it says distribution system for charities. Such charities shall go to the poor, the needy, the workers who collect them, the new converts, to free the slaves, those burdened by sudden expenses, in the cause of God, and to the traveling alien. So your charity, general charities, can go to all of these things, right? But then if you look at the verses about zakat, like it specifically talks about who it goes to, right? And it's basically saying that it can only go to, um, where is the verse? Uh, I just had it pulled up
It
here.
was in the same surah, right? I was reading the other day, I think.
Right.
Yeah,
So
yeah, I know the difference
it says
between
recipients of
yeah.
charity. It says they ask you about giving a charity. It says the charity shall go to the parents, the relatives, the orphans, the poor, and the traveling alien. And then the messenger explains that, uh, these are in that order. These are the people that your zakat charity has to go to. So this verse is about the zakat. So that doesn't bring in, like, for example, people who collect them. But your with your charities, with these organizations, the organization is the people who collect the charities, right? So they're the people who collect them. So your other charities can go to such people, but not your zakat. It has to go directly to the people that need money, and you directly give it to them yourself.
Yeah, mashallah,
You'll
thank you.
find people like that. I mean,
Yeah, I
it's
will
difficult, but when
change
you
the way.
look around, yeah, when you look around, you'll find them.
Yeah, yeah.
God will show
And
you.
then, yeah, one more question. There was one thing you were talking about the two previous lectures before. It was about enemies of God and not keeping them as friends of yours, right?
Hmm.
Because how can you be friends with someone who's an enemy? So I've one friend, and then I told him about submission, and he was totally against it. But this person is also a needy person, right? He has a family and two children. So can my zakat go, for example, to a person like him?
Right. So, like when you see that he was absolutely against it, was it like against it to the point where, he doesn't want to listen anymore and you don't see any hope for him? Or was it someone that you think that, maybe you think he might change? You have to use your judgment, but if it's the kind that you think that he has no means of changing and he's, becomes belligerent and upset and all that stuff, that, he hates it, and he is to the point where he's not really neutral and he's never going to accept, and he's one of those people, then of course he professes disbelief and he's not neutral, then the messenger talks about it too. He says you run away from this person, you run for your life, basically. And then someone asks, even the messenger is like, so you don't help them? He's like, no, you run for your life from them. But
It's
obviously
not
that
like,
doesn't, but that doesn't mean, for example, if someone's like, wearing a cross on the street and asking for charity, that you don't give it to them because he's a disbeliever, right? But it's not the same as, for example, someone in your family, for example, who's ardent opponent of submission and is fighting you and all that, and mocking the religion and things like that, for example. And then basically they're saying that this is just a bunch of lies and I don't believe it, and you find that this person's hopeless, then you just walk away from them. You're not, you help people that you care for, that you want to help. These are not the people that you should have like sympathy or empathy towards or want to look after their well-being. You want to support people that are good, in that sense, or you have hope for, somebody who is even an atheist, but it's someone that you don't know that maybe they might become submitters, but someone who you have full knowledge that he's not going to be a submitter, and there's no point in being around that person, is just a toxic person, you have to run from this person. You don't even help them at that point. I mean, that's how I understand from the Messenger of the Covenant as well, because these are God's enemies, right? Why would you help God's enemies? That would not make any sense. Like financially supporting God's enemies, right? Why? I mean, common sense wise, like you don't want to do that in the first place. So
yeah, I
giving them the
understand.
charities doesn't make
Yeah,
sense.
but this is like, okay, you friends. I was 6 year old, right? And we are still friends after 30 years. So and he is needy, right? But I spoke him about submission, and he's not like an acting like an enemy, but and you can talk, right? You can talk normal with this guy. Um, but I don't know what to say about his acts. Like if someone says, "No, I don't accept this," after 3 years,
Hmm.
then should I give up? Should I give up and then say, "Okay, he will never accept this, so I need to run away from him"?
Well, I mean, like you have to use your own judgment. You know your friend
Mm,
better than
yeah.
anybody else, and it's not really about time. But you can judge the situation, you can judge him by what he's
Mm,
saying, the things he's saying, how he's saying it, how adamant he is. I mean, these are the things that you know about this person, and his personality in that sense. But if you have hope for him, then fine. But if you don't see hope for him, then you just basically
mm.
run away from that kind of a
No hope.
person.
No, no. I
Yeah,
understand now. No hope.
yeah,
Okay.
right, yeah,
Thank you.
yeah.
I want to
I'm
clarify
really.
one thing though, just
Hmm.
sorry, that for zakat, if you have relatives who are not submitters, you can still send zakat to them because it's just God says relative, right? The needy. Does not say they must be submitters or anything. So you in your family, especially at this point, many people who might not be submitters,
Yeah,
but
but I
they
mean,
Yes.
but then
So,
again, this thing would apply that you do have hope for them. Like there are people you have absolutely no
yeah,
hope for.
like
Like
in back
these are
home, I send
disbelievers,
my zakat to people who I don't have a chance to even see them in my life. You
right?
know,
But you still don't know if they could become submitters even without
yeah,
seeing you.
yeah, if
yeah.
they could or they could not. They're an orphan
Hmm.
who are still underage, so I send money for them,
Right.
right? And
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
they
So
are not
there.
being raised by submitters. They're being raised by other family members and all that.
Yeah. Okay. So in my family, I told lots of them about submission, and none of them accepted this. So, but some of them are needy, and some of them were very like they were really as an enemy.
Hmm.
And if I hear this, should I still help them
The
when they are
enemies?
needy? Yeah, like enemies, like we're
No.
talking about submission and about the messenger of the covenant and
Hmm.
all of the stuff what we're talking about. And
You know,
uh,
if you find that,
yeah.
if you find that you don't have hope for them, that's what you have to ask yourself. Do you see hope for them when you see their behavior and attitude? The ones
No.
that will be, yeah. So then that's your answer. You know.
So then I'm not gonna send zakat to them.
No, you'll
That's
find
the my
people
answer.
who are even Christians
Okay.
that will not oppose your religion. You can give it to them rather than giving it to people who are, fighting and attacking your religion and doing that kind of campaigning and stuff, right? So, of course, they're not keeping it to themselves. They're obviously also telling other people, hey, this is bad, and other people are looking at it as well. They're trying to put down submission. So why would you want to help
Yeah.
them and make them even stronger? In society,
Yeah,
like,
because they have children, right? And you
yeah,
think about
yeah,
children and start up. Okay, it's not also really like an enemy, but not accepting it. Okay, and then leave it by that. But
yeah.
I
So
have my
basically,
answer
the
there.
reason is like you run away from them, right? So run away means like
Mm,
obviously the people that you help, you stay in touch, you talk to them, like you say, hey, I sent you charity, for example, and they thank you and you have conversations with them and all that. But if somebody is a disbeliever, you don't want to have any sort of relations with them, so you don't, you shouldn't be like going to them or visiting them or talking to them and saying, hey, I got charity for you and this and that, like doesn't make sense.
okay, that's a lot of people whom I
All
told
right.
about submission and they didn't accept. So
Mhm.
there is no one left almost.
Oh, really? I mean,
Okay.
like there should
Yeah,
still be
yeah,
people that
really.
could have said like they don't believe it, but like you could still have hope for some of those people, depending on the circumstance. But yeah, I mean, it's possible that most of them are hardcore idol
Yeah,
worshippers that are against it.
most of
Yeah, yeah,
them,
right. Yeah,
mostly not.
yeah.
It's
So
very,
I have
Hmm.
one question. So there are some relatives, not some, a lot of relatives
yes,
who did not accept this submission religion, but still
yes,
they are not opposing or they are ardent enemy or something like
Hmm.
that. They are like, okay, to you is your religion, to us is our
Hmm.
religion. So with
yeah.
them we can keep the amicable relationship, right?
Yeah,
And
because
if they
you,
are in need,
yeah.
so we can help them too.
Yeah, because they, even though they're telling you that you can use your judgment and know that because they're not fighting you and resisting your religion and stuff like that. I
Yeah,
mean, someday something could click and they could change, based on the fact that they see you helping them and all that, right? But the ones that are fighting and against it and stuff like
yeah,
that,
they come in
these are
different
the ones.
category. Yeah,
Category is different. Yeah, yeah.
yeah,
Hmm. Okay, because you have some of them, right? They are just they have a normal education, not a high education, and they really don't know about Islam. Everything that they know is what they hear from the imams of the mosques, right? And
Hmm.
some from TV. And then when you talk to those guys and you talk about submission, it's like, okay, but you're then the only one who is believing in this because all the imams and millions of Muslims, they don't believe in this, so you can't be right. And then you try to convince them and give some evidence, but still they are not accepting it. But they are not like enemies, right? They're just normal family who don't accept this and they think this is something new and they see you as ignoring Muhammad
Yeah, I mean,
like that.
if you don't see them fighting you and stuff like that, and you know best, if you find that in your heart that there may be hope for this person, then it's fine, But if you know this person is going to hell, more than likely, I mean, and there's no way this person's gonna accept submission, then your job is to just run the other way.
I see. Okay.
Yeah,
Thank you.
welcome. Mashallah.
Mashallah.
Thanks for bringing that up, mashallah. It's always a question that pops up in our heads every now and then. I
I've
mean,
got
most people
more,
have
but
that question, yeah.
that will come later, inshallah. I don't want to ask all the
Inshallah.
question in one, and
Mashallah, yeah,
that will come.
that's good, It's good to ask questions. But I mean, you can ask more questions if you want. I don't know. I don't think we have too many comments about stuff. If you have another question, maybe we could talk about it.
Yeah, there are a few, but I will ask them the next time, inshallah.
Well,
So I
All
have a
right.
quick
Thanks, brother.
question. The like I have a lot of relatives. They live in a village, and they're desperate need. So what I do is like messenger of the covenant say that don't go when the day you get your paycheck, when you harvest your check, that the zakat has to go out on that day. But in certain situations where you cannot send money every month, so I do send it in advance. I don't try to go late. So is that okay practice? Because
You mean a certain?
it's not easy for them to pick it up the check, because it's a village
No,
area.
you can. Oh, well, you mean like they don't have a bank account?
Yeah, there's no way to send bank. You have to send to somebody or some other source, or it's not that easy.
Well, how do you send it?
Usually give it to my father
Oh,
whenever he comes in, and or the very difficult situation is the Western
mm,
Union.
yeah. I mean, even Western Union. Yeah, Western Union. Yeah, I mean, you can like actually you can set up a bank account or something at least
No, they don't
somewhere.
have
So,
that. They don't have
no, but
access to it.
somebody who is in Pakistan, for example, will have a bank account, right? And then they can go, you can put it in the bank in their bank account whenever you get it, and then they can give it whenever they're going, you know. Like let's say even if you're giving it to your father, you don't have to wait till your father comes here every time. You can just put in your father's bank account, and whenever it's convenient for your father to go there, I mean he can just take the money out of his account and give it to them
Mhm.
at least, so that you are not keeping that money with you and it's
No,
out of
no,
your
I'm not,
system.
mashallah, I'm not keeping it, but I try to, I give it in advance,
Yeah, I
not
mean you
not
can do that
late.
too. You can do that too.
Okay, that's what my question. That because it's
Yeah.
not something wrong with giving in advance.
Yeah.
Okay, because actually,
Yeah, as
mashallah, I
long
don't
as you're
try
not giving
to.
it afterward, you're not delaying it, giving it
That's
in advance, if you
right,
already know how much you're gonna get, then that's
right.
the master explained that that's totally fine.
Mashallah, thank you. That's what I
Yeah.
want to ask you.
Okay. Do you want to talk about your other question that you asked about the sky?
Oh yeah, that's a very important. Why that? I
You
ponder,
want to
look at
know if the
this.
sky is blue?
The question I've been saving to ask you. Yeah, I just want to say that that when you start the Quran study, this is very important that you were mentioning that, like in the custom that we grew up, and even right, a lot of the people, I swear to God, we hear that a lot. Like Pakistan, mein, like like kasam say, like it's a very normal thing to gain credibility, and we don't know God is condemning that. That we're not supposed to say that. Yeah, we can praise God, mention God in a positive way, but we cannot swear by God's name to validate your statement or gain a
Mm-hmm.
business. Like I go to pretty much, I mean, a lot of these grocery stores, and where they have a God's name mentioned all over, and some of them are playing Quran recitation in the background.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, like a song. So people will
Mm-hmm.
come in and they think that this is a righteous place. Let's buy it here. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, there, and some of them have. I think almost all of them have a place to pray to gain the business. Their intentions are different. But mashallah, how you mentioned that when people says, "Oh, geez," it's because when something bad happens to you, it's a reflex. It's
Mm-hmm.
uncontrolled. Like you put something in your mouth, like a finger, you're gonna have a gag reflex. It's out of control. So if something bad happens to you, what comes out of your mouth? If you say, "Oh, geez," then God was not your God.
Mm-hmm.
If unintentionally something happens, they say, "Oh my God," or yeah,
Mm-hmm.
you remember God. That's
This
mean
OMG.
OMG, maybe, yeah, yeah. You remember God. It's a reflex, right?
Yeah,
Because
I'm
if
just
you've been thinking
kidding.
about if God was your God and you're thinking about God most of the time, in reflex times, He's the name. If you say, "Oh shit," like God, a messenger says, on the day of judgment, people will be waking up, "Oh shit," because that's what they used to be.
Mm-hmm.
And I hear that a lot at work. Anything that bad happens, they either gonna mention some bad word or F word, or they're gonna, their idols. You know,
Mm-hmm.
very rarely. I mean, they're gonna have saying God. Mashallah, that's what I mentioned.
So I also wanted to add one thing to Jaffer, your question. Um, uh, about the charity with the mosque, you know. So if you go to page 433 in Appendix 15, in the last paragraph on the obligatory charity, zakat, it says uh, zakat must be carefully calculated and given away on a regular basis whenever we receive any income. Government taxes should be deducted, but not other expenses. I mean, this was something we were discussing the other day. Government taxes should be deducted, but not other expenses such as debts, mortgages, and living expenses, right? If one does not know needy persons, he or she may give the zakat to a mosque or a charitable organization with the distinct purpose of helping poor people. And then it says charity is given to mosques or hospitals or organizations themselves cannot be considered zakat, you know. So, you know, that portion that you give to them, if you do give them a, you know, your zakat, if you can't absolutely find anybody, you know, you have to make sure you let them know that you cannot use a single dime out of this money, this specific amount for your own organization. You must give this whole amount to these poor people for your whole charity to be calculated as zakat, to be considered as zakat, you know. But if you have money on top of that, I mean, you could give them, right? So if you know that, let's say, they say that no, we have to take 10% or whatever, you know, then you make sure that you give them 10% extra because you have to give your specific charity amount to them. But that amount, hospital or the organization itself, and not towards the needy people. I mean, he clearly mentions here that, you know, that's not considered your zakat.
Okay, so I see.
Mm-hmm.
The amount I'm giving to the mosque, I will stop this because I have my answer
Mm-hmm.
for that one. They don't
Mm-hmm.
need the money. I had other intentions for that, but now I have my
Right.
answer. The other thing
Mm-hmm.
about my friend who's doing this charity work is like if I'm sending some some money, they send me exactly the receipts of, for example, they go to a house and there are some needy people there, and they buy the stuff and they show me the recipe of the stuff they bought for them. And for
Recipe?
example, yes, the how do you call this? Receipt, receipt, yes,
Receipt,
receipt, yes, receipt of everything.
yeah, receipt.
Receipt, yes, correct. So they
No,
show me the
receipt,
receipt,
not there's no
receipt,
P. Yeah, yeah, receipt. Yeah,
receipt. Yes,
yeah,
okay,
yeah,
thank you.
yeah, yeah.
So they show me the receipt, and then I can see the amount there. And when they are sending the money from this country to a poor country, the sending money is managed by them. So it's not my zakat they are using for sending the money, or for even 1%. They are not using
Mm-hmm.
for
The fee,
administration or
this
something.
right. So
And
you're saying like all of the charity that you have that you give, they don't they give it to the poor person directly.
yes, they give it to the poor person directly. And because they are an organization, they also have some money, and they use their money to send the money. So
Oh,
they are not touching your money you are sending. And they're
okay.
sending you pictures and videos, and
Mm-hmm.
they are showing you that they're real people, and they
Mm-hmm.
show
Mm-hmm.
pictures of giving the money to there.
Yeah.
So, and but these organizations are, some of them are Sunni organizations, right? They are not
Yeah,
submitted.
I wouldn't trust them, honestly. Like if they say that,
Mm.
you know, because God says a lot of people take people's money illicitly, right? And they're
Mm.
hoarding it without, and you know, they don't spend it in the cause of God. They lie, you know. So you can't trust them. If even if they say like, for me, I don't trust them. Like if they say like the Sunni, especially the Sunni organizations or the hardcore Christian organizations, you know, as long as like they're religious organizations that are, you know, belongs to like hypocrites and idol worshippers, like I, for me personally, like I wouldn't trust them if they say that, yeah, we give all of it, you know, because we know they're so corrupt, like they're abusing children in these mosques and organizations. Like, how do you even trust them with the money? You know, so if they're saying it, that's fine. I mean, of course, it was your intention that matters. If they said they're not gonna give it to anybody, you give it, you know. So God, you know, is forgiver, most merciful. If you don't know, you don't know. But I have my serious reservations. Like, I don't know if somebody's saying they're gonna give 10% only, and they keep 20%, for example. I don't even know that, right? Because once you give them money, you don't know what they did with it. But if they're showing videos and stuff, and you know for a fact you've been there and all that, and you know that no, you can trust these people, then you can trust them, right?
Yeah,
But I personally
like,
find it very
so
hard.
sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
When I used to go to regular mosque, when I was out of worshiper, uh, there a lot of orphan kids used to come, single parents, and they used to collect charity. Can I, like, for example, if I need to really give, can I go to the mosque and on Friday, and there's a lot of single orphan kids comes in, and can I give them by hand? Is that okay to go to the mosque
Well,
by
as
my
long as you're
hand?
not praying in the mosque, I mean,
Okay,
you
yeah,
can
but I
go
can give
there.
them, right? Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, brother.
But why don't you give it to them outside the mosque? Like, what? Don't go in. You don't have to because, I mean, then you're encouraging people to go to the mosque.
I don't have to listen to the sermon you said. I don't have to do the namaz. No, well, I would honestly suggest, brother, that there's a lot of, you can go to the even church, and there's, if you go
Hmm.
out and you look for it, you will find
Yeah, but I'm saying you could
crazy amount
even,
of people.
yeah, yeah, but you could hang around, hang out outside the mosque,
Yeah,
where they are, and you'll see them, right? I mean, unless you have so much charity that you're not even gonna get a chance. So if you have, I mean, let's talk. I'm just kidding. Yeah,
yeah. Even
but
Messenger of the Covenant says those places that feed the poor people, and you can give them because they pay most of their money on the food uh, feeding
hmm
places, like the senior citizen or old people or
hmm
poor people. That's one good
hmm
place. Or maybe
hmm
volunteer one day. That'd
yeah,
be a form of charity too.
yeah. I mean, also like you can find a lot of people on the streets. Like, there might be areas in the city that are you see a lot of homeless people. You can just go and give it to them if you can't find anybody. Like, there must be areas, pockets in your
Yeah,
city, like
go
maybe
to LA
you,
downtown.
yeah,
Uh,
like,
Sulaiman, yeah,
yeah.
you said this. Lately, there was a guy who came to me,
Hmm.
and he asked for money, right? But he was smelling to alcohol. So I asked him. I said, okay, we can go somewhere, and I can buy some food for you, but I'm
Hmm.
not gonna give you some money. Then
Hmm.
he didn't accept this, right?
Hmm.
Um, but you can see clearly that he is in need. But if he gets some money, he will use
Hmm.
this for alcohol, for drinking.
Well, you don't
Uh,
know that for sure, right? Because let's say he might not have eaten in 2 days. Even if he's an alcoholic, he still needs to eat some food to survive. So, uh, I mean,
what
that's
should I do?
you could give him money because it's your intention
Still,
is to give it to him for food. So, if you want to give him money, and if he just said no, you should give me money. I mean, you can give him money. uh, because you don't know that portion of the money he could just use for food. Food is not something that you can live without. So he's definitely gonna buy it. You just don't know for sure what if he's gonna buy food with it or he's gonna buy drugs. But there's times when you see people they just say give me money for drugs. Like they literally in America, like you see people who are holding signs like they say I need money for booze, and things like that. You just
yeah, but in this
you don't
country,
get
you
them, yeah.
you have a lot of
Because
places where you can have
yeah,
food, right? This guy, he can go to places and he can have free food, and then but still he's asking you for some. And then at that moment, I'm thinking of the ayat where Allah says, right? Then if someone asks you, then you should help him. You
yeah. I
shouldn't
mean,
ignore him.
the thing is, you can't be suspicious. That's the part, that you have to be careful about. So, I mean, also a lot of times, like I see homeless people, like they look like drug addicts. But if a person's homeless, it's really hard to tell whether the person is a drug addict or the person's genuinely been starving, and has gone through like, very sick times, like he could be severely sick, you don't know. But if you know for a fact he's saying, yeah, I'm gonna use it for booze, then it makes sense. But most of the times they don't do that. Like here, you see people like hanging outside like 7-Eleven and stuff. And people like right away, oh, he's gonna use it for booze, you know, and they don't help those people because they're like, oh, he's just by there. I mean, he's just gonna go get beer inside, you know. But you can't do that because that portion that you're giving him, you know, more than likely it's a small amount anyways, right? So, you know, you don't know, he could be using that portion for his food. And plus, he's not just gonna get money from you. He might have gotten money from other people too. So, so he could still get booze with the other portion that he might get from someone else, you know. But you don't have to be suspicious. That's the part that makes it tricky.
Yeah,
Yeah,
we
not too
God,
suspicious.
God says the beggar, and we cannot also put conditions on our money. If a beggar didn't say is, hey, give me money for drugs or and whatever, it's on them what they said, oh, usually they've been saying, oh, can you spare $1 for coffee or something, right? Or I need to eat, or I need bus fare. They have their ways, but what we're not gonna ask them or question their intention, because they ask for money for something, food or whatever. So God is gonna reward you for your intention. We do these things for our soul, right? What they do with that money is after that, So we absolutely cannot, like, I don't judge them how they smell or they don't or whatever, because then we're just making an
Hmm.
assumption, and
Hmm.
we should avoid any kind of suspicion and assumption. God says uh, even a little bit of suspicion is sinful. So
Hmm.
instead of earning credit, we might earn sin. So we have to be careful. If somebody asks for, say, they look like even a druggie or whatever, doesn't matter. If they ask for food, whatever we can, and we do not follow that with insult, like, okay, I'm not gonna give you
Hmm.
money, and I'll buy you food, then we're putting our conditions on it and
Hmm.
assuming that this person is gonna go ahead and abuse this money in a different way. So
Yeah, and
for
I.
our own soul, we have to be extra careful.
Hmm. Yeah, mashallah. And I believe that, you know, if a person is smelling of alcohol, then it's there are chances that he's going to use the money you're giving them for food because you already had the alcohol, you know. So,
Yeah, but I
That's a good
specifically
point.
asked him, right? Or okay,
yeah.
let's go and let me buy you some food. But he didn't accept when I said this.
Hmm. Hmm.
So was the right thing to do just give him the money and then say, okay, go ahead, and then leave it with God, or because
Yeah, because you know
I didn't give it to him because
yeah, because your
yeah.
intention is to just help the person, right? So with
Mm.
your
Okay,
money,
I
so
see.
you can just do it. I mean, it spares you the time, you know, being spent in queuing up and getting the food and giving it to him, you know. It's easier to just give him the money and let him buy whatever he wants himself.
Mm. Maybe he want pizza and you took him to burger place.
Yeah.
That could be
Yeah,
risky.
we cannot choose.
Yeah.
We can avoid that kind of
I would buy anything for him what he wanted, but
a lot
when
of
I
Y-
said okay, let's buy some food, he didn't want to go. Then he
no,
stopped.
they
He
Yeah.
just
something
Maybe he didn't like the fact that you were being
insulted.
suspicious, you know,
oh maybe
also.
I will
Yeah.
stop doing that too.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah,
okay,
mashallah.
I understand.
Mashallah. So I guess
Mashallah, thank you.
you're welcome, mashallah. So I think we could probably conclude our study here unless someone has any other questions or comments. It's 4 p.m. And God willing, we are going to have, inshallah, God willing, we're going to have our next study on Saturday at 9:30 a.m. Pacific time. And our teacher is going to be Nudot, God willing. Thank you
Uh,
all for joining
Adam,
us. Or Adam? No, you.
yeah, you and I
No,
switched.
you're always you and I switched.
This was supposed to be my study, and I did instead of you.
Oh, and I didn't tell you. Yeah, yeah, yeah. You're right. Okay, yeah, that makes sense. Okay, Ali. So it's gonna be your turn, God willing. Adam's not in town, so it's gonna be
Oh,
Ali's turn.
Yeah, I'm out of town. I'm in Texas.
Adam, you never retaliate against someone who comes.
My brain
It's
translates
just
as
one-sided war all the time.
when he says Ali, it translates to Adam in my brain.
You're so cool about that. It's okay,
Because
whatever.
a lot of people call me with the name Ali here locally, and this was my old name, so it's not strange for me. I'm used to it.
So thank you all. Inshallah, Ali will lead the study on
But
Saturday at 9:30 a.m. Pacific time.
MashaAllah.
All right.
Mashallah.
Sorry, you want
Thank
to
you
say
very
something?
much.
You want to
Thank
say something? Okay. All right. Thanks.
Assalamu alaikum.
MashaAllah. Assalamu alaikum.